This is a model essay on Anne in Spectacles. The essay achieved almost full marks. The question was, how does Priestley use the character of the inspector to suggest ways that society could be improved? Write about what society is shown to be like in the play and how it might be improved, and how Priestley presents society through what the inspector says and does. The essay is 7 paragraphs long, totalling 870 words. In Anne in Spectacles, Priestley depicts society in 1912 as capitalist-ruled, segregated and unfair, using the Burling family as a symbol for all upper-class aristocrats. The character, Inspector Gould, acts as Priestley's social mouthpiece to portray the idea that socialism is the future. The inspector could be the technique that Priestley uses to convey his own ideas and opinions, because in 1944 to 1945, when the play was written, Priestley was a figure who campaigned for a social welfare state and a more moral system. It is plausible that Priestley wrote the play set in 1912 to convey the contrast between the pre- and post-war societies. At the start of the play, stage directions indicate to us that the Burlings are having an engagement meal in celebration of Sheila and Gerald's pending marriage. When Burling, the head of the house and possibly the most passionate capitalist, says a man has to make his own way in life, the doorbell rings, signalling the entrance of the inspector. This stage direction indicates to us that the inspector will turn the Burlings' artificial world upside down, sobering them to the harsh realities of the life for the poor. Equally, the entrance of Inspector Gould turns the stage lighting from pink and intimate to brighter and harder. This, to the audience, would visually appear as if the rose-tinted spectacles, filtering out negativity and realism in their lives, would have been lifted and replaced with a brighter, harder light of an interrogation room. This theatrical device acts as dramatic irony, because the audience can see how Priestley is changing the physical setting to change the tone of the atmosphere, and to foreshadow change that the inspector represents. As an audience, one can infer that Priestley is using the inspector to criticise and reveal to the upper classes their sins. When being questioned by the inspector, Burling relates how Eva Smith had far too much to say, and therefore had to go, just for asking for a small raise, an amount Burling could have easily spared. Instead, the hard-headed businessman sent her on her way, beginning the chain of events that would lead to her untimely demise. Sheila often seems like a character heavily influenced by the inspector's questioning of her father's actions. This is particularly evident when she says that these girls are people too, not just cheap labour. In the context of a society in 1912, if you were female, your options were considerably limited. Firstly, the expectation was that women should marry and be a faithful housewife, or secondly, to become cheap labour for those within power. The inspector also concludes that Burling's reactions were hasty, ill-advised and wrong, because he later mentions how we are all of one body. The phrase one body indicates to an audience that he believes in order to prevent such tragedies occurring in the future, we must act as a communal body in a socialist revolution. The inspector's appearance too tells us that he will have great influence and strengthens his societal ideas, increasing their importance even further. The fact that he at once created an impression of massiveness, solidity and purposefulness, despite lacking stature, indicates to an audience that his presence will change things and his character holds all the power to instill these changes. In fact, once the interrogation is over, the inspector states a brief but ominous warning: if people don't change, we will pay the price in fire, blood and anguish. This biblical reference indicates to us that Priestley is giving the inspector godlike status, as if this change is so urgently necessary that even God is enforcing it. The use of the words fire, blood and anguish create a semantic field of hell and doom, hinting that without social conformity, acceptance of culpability and an increased moral radar, we as one body face turmoil in the hands of our own capitalist selfishness. Priestley truly did believe this, evidently from the inspector's interrogation, because in 1945 he, along with 12 million others, voted Labour in the election, causing a landslide win for the first time in history. The inspector also subtly hints at how society can be improved upon by his actions and words. For instance, when Mr. Burling tells Sheila to leave, for being the capitalist misogynistic man he was, believed that Sheila couldn't handle staying. However, the inspector politely asks her to stay. This action foreshadows socialist changes that come after the war, as women's role in society became more and more prevalent and significant. In a way, all of the inspector's actions could be indicating how, through following his advice, a better, less tragic society could be formed. This is directly symbolic of Priestley's message, as he believed that the future of Britain was socialist. He wanted all to benefit from a better, more advanced system than the current capitalist one. If a socialist welfare system existed in 1912, ultimately Eva Smith and millions more would have survived. Workers would also be on a fair regulated wage, which would have prevented any strike, and therefore Eva would have remained in employment. Effectively, the inspector opens audiences' eyes to the devastating effects that a capitalist nation could bring. If you found this helpful, you may wish to check out some of the links in the description for some other supportive resources.